All right, juniors, how are you doing? This is Mr. Torres. I just wanted to take a moment to clarify some confusion that there may be regarding our rhetorical analysis thesis statements and what we should be thinking of, what we should be doing in approaching an analysis of any text that we read, be it a speech, a sermon like this, an article, anything like that. So what you have in front of you is a sample, a student sample of a rhetorical analysis thesis statement that was submitted on Tuesday of this last week. Just a second. Okay. So that was submitted on Tuesday of this last week. And on Tuesday, I was out and you all were going through the line of reasoning PowerPoint in Canvas. And at the end of that PowerPoint, you should have gotten or understood that when we look at a text such as sinners in the hands of an angry God, we need to be thinking of how the speaker is building their argument. So how is the argument built? Okay. And we need to understand that arguments are built piece by piece. Okay, so as the argument goes on, it builds and builds and builds until we get eventually at the end some kind of action or directive. This is what the author wants us to do, or wants their audience to do. After experiencing the discourse, after experiencing this text, okay? So in thinking about that, with the line of reasoning argument, with the line of reasoning strategy in the back of our heads, I initially told you to break up sinners in the hands of an angry God into different sections. Just look at where we have shifts in tone, shifts in message, anything like that. And I think that if you are thinking the way that I am thinking, what you are doing first is you're probably looking at these first couple of paragraphs and you're probably saying that this is some kind of introduction. And then here in paragraph 2, it says, the expression that I have chosen for my text seems to imply the following things. Okay, so the following things that are coming after this are the different implications of this verse. And there are about 7 things. And if you look, Jonathan Edwards has numbered these for us. Okay, so there's actually 4 things that he's done. So this would be the implications of this verse. And then we go after implications and then look in paragraph 10. It says the truth of this observation may appear by the following considerations. And so then there are different considerations. Right? And so we go down and there's 4 on this page. We go to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 considerations. So 10 considerations. And then after that, we have this section called application. Okay, application meaning how are you going to apply? What do you do? Right? So then we have this application section. So we already have 3 sections. And then after the application section, we go here, and then in paragraph 35, consider here more particularly several things. So we have more considerations, right? And then, he numbers them off. 1, 2, 3, 4 additional considerations. And then you'll notice here in paragraph 44, we start to get question marks. And actually before, we get question marks here. Okay, so here in this area on page 10, we have a change in tone, right? And so I'm going to go ahead and say that the change in tone is probably going to be about here. And from here on, we have Jonathan Edwards asking, what are you going to do with your soul? How are you going to get out of this predicament that you are in, right? And this is where he starts to give his advice, how we can save ourselves, or how the congregation can save themselves from the wrath of God. So that is his kind of structural line of reasoning, okay? And so we have his introduction, his implications, considerations, application, further considerations, and then the advice, okay? And so you'll notice that we have about 5 different sections, and that is a little bit confusing and a little bit of a problem, because if you write an essay based on the line of reasoning, then for this essay in particular, you would have 5 body paragraphs for line of reasoning. One body paragraph per element, per section, and then you would need an introduction and a conclusion. And so that means that we would have 7 total paragraphs. That's the paragraph symbol. This is an S. All right, so 7 total paragraphs. Now in an essay, 7 total paragraphs is not unheard of. However, we can definitely make this easier. So how do we make this easier? Okay, this is our big question, okay? And in class on Wednesday, we came up with the solution to divide any text, whether it's sinners in the hands of an angry God or any shorter text, into 3 different sections. So divide any and all texts into 3 sections. And those sections are going to be beginning, middle, and end. Can't even spell middle right. So these are going to be our 3 sections. So now, rather than looking at the introduction, the implications, the considerations, the application, the further considerations, and the conclusion where we get our advice, we're going to be looking at just the beginning, the middle, and the end. This is what we want to be looking at, okay? So we need to discuss, this is what we have to do, discuss what the author does in the beginning, middle, and end of the text. So this is our goal. Discuss what the author is doing in the beginning, middle, and end of the text. All right. So on Tuesday, you had this assignment to create a rhetorical analysis thesis statement. And that's where we got this student sample right here. And in that template that you were provided, it says to include 3 rhetorical choices the author makes, okay? And there were 3 different blanks, right? And what I saw happening was that students were identifying 3 rhetorical devices and not choices. We need to be doing choices. So we have this sample here, and it says, in the sermon, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, made in 1741 by Jonathan Edwards, a scholar, theologian, and Puritan preacher, Edwards uses syntax, diction, and similes in order to make the reader understand the dire situation of their afterlife, ultimately moving his congregation, the non-converted and religious people, to chase God more and act upon the warning that he has given them. Okay? At first, this seems like a pretty good thesis statement. However, the issue with this thesis statement is that the student has included 3 rhetorical devices and not choices. Okay, so we need choices, not devices. Okay, and the reason that you want choices and not devices is because, organizationally speaking, right, when you have a 3-prong thesis, the 3 things in your thesis statement become your body paragraphs. So you would have your first body paragraph being about syntax, your second body paragraph being about diction, your third body paragraph being about similes. Now, the reason that this is an issue is because it implies that Jonathan Edwards is only using syntax, diction, and similes. Quick side note, every author uses syntax and diction, okay? So you don't want to say that the author uses syntax or diction. You want to say what type of syntax and what type of diction that they use, okay? But aside from that, the reason that we don't want to have devices is because it implies that the author is only using these things here when we know that that isn't true, okay? It implies that the only thing we can find worth analyzing in the author's writing is their syntax, is their diction, and is their similes, okay? So we're going to make a small change, and we're going to talk about what the author does in the beginning, the middle, and the end of their text, okay? So here, I'm going to write beginning, middle, and end, okay? And so when we think about sinners in the hands of an angry God, we need to think about what is Jonathan Edwards doing in the beginning of the text. And in the beginning of the text, he warns his congregation of their impending doom because of their sins, right? He informs them of the peril that they are in. In the middle of the text, he is, for a big portion of this text, he is talking about God's wrath, okay? So he is expounding, and that's just a fancy word for elaborating upon, expounding upon God's anger and wrath, okay? And then in the end of the text, he is giving his congregation a way to avoid God's anger and wrath. Okay? And so, in doing this, we have changed our strategy from talking about devices to talking about choices. We're basically summarizing the big ideas that Jonathan Edwards is presenting in the beginning, middle, and end of his text. Now, the reason that this is better is because rather than constraining ourselves, handcuffing ourselves to discussing only syntax, only diction, and only similes, we can now, in each body paragraph, discuss anything that we see in the beginning, middle, and end of these texts. So in the first body paragraph, I can discuss diction, syntax, imagery, metaphors, similes, symbolism, any of these. I can discuss any of these in any paragraph. I can discuss them in the first, I can discuss them in the second, I can discuss them in the third. Now, as I discussed in class, as I talked about in class, when you have the freedom to do this, freedom equals responsibility. When you have the freedom to talk about whatever you want, you have the responsibility to stay organized. Make my job as a reader easy. And the way that you would stay organized is in each body paragraph, you should discuss no more than 2 rhetorical devices. Okay? No more than 2 rhetorical devices. For example, first body paragraph, I may discuss diction and syntax. Second, I may discuss imagery and symbolism. And in my third, I may discuss similes and metaphors. Now, again, I'm doing this chronologically, okay, to maintain organization, all right? But rather than speaking about only 3 things, I now have the ability to speak about 6 things. And when you speak about all of these things here, you are presenting a more sophisticated argument. Okay? You're presenting a more sophisticated argument, a full analysis of all aspects of the piece, okay? Beginning, middle, and end. And when you do that, you become and position yourself as a more skilled writer, okay? Another thing that I mentioned about doing this, syntax, diction, and similes. If you were like me, when I was in high school, a little bit lazy, a little bit busy, I am going to this first page and I am finding an example of diction. I am finding an example of syntax. I'm finding an example of imagery. And I'm getting it all from the first page. And I am going to restrict my analysis to this first page and leave out the other 10 or 11 pages that Jonathan Edwards worked so hard to produce. And that does not present a full analysis of the entire text. Okay, so that is why you want to go beginning, middle, and end. You are analyzing the full text. Okay, the full text, providing multiple different looks at multiple different things. All right, so in class, we will start to put together our outlines, and we want to take time with our outline. The better you build your outline, the easier it will be to produce a well-written rhetorical analysis. Okay, I hope this helped as a review or for anybody who missed class on Tuesday or Wednesday. I look forward to working with you on these essays, and we'll knock them out of the park, and we will be definitely prepared for the AP exam. All right, guys, have a good night.